That was Casting Crowns. The song is Thrive. You're listening to Remnant Radio 100.1. The program is See the Glory. Thank you for tuning in. This morning, I'll be here with you from 9 to 12. My name is Zachary Seals, and if you want to reach out, I just put together an email address where you can contact me and give any kind of feedback you like. If you want to make a song suggestion, if you want to recommend a topic or a theme for the show. I usually do the show by themes. Theme this week is wisdom, as found in the book of James. So yeah, go ahead and send me an email if you'd like at seethegloryradio, that's S-E-E, seethegloryradio @gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to support this radio station, Remnant Radio, not just my program, but all the programs on this station, please consider doing so at www.radioremnant.org. So going back to the book of James, we've been talking about what it means to live a life of wisdom in response to the gospel. And wisdom is seeing that there's a bigger perspective, right? It's not just taking in more knowledge or individual facts. It's putting those facts in context, seeing how they relate, and recognizing biblically that God is above all of our knowledge. He's sovereign and in control over the outcome of our lives. So wisdom recognizes that the trials and periods of suffering that we're in are to produce steadfastness. Wisdom recognizes that riches will fade away in the grand scheme, in the great context. So don't let those things be a source of arrogance for you now. Wisdom recognizes that we are to spend our time caring for the orphan, for the widow, for the poor, the outcast, and society. And wisdom also recognizes this attempt to be holistic and integrated in our lives is that we actually practice what we preach. We live the way we say we're going to live. I think of the quotation from Gandhi, once read, that he said, "I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." If we simply lived the way we proclaimed, people would see a very different picture. And James says it perhaps most clearly in chapter 1, verse 22, when he says, "But be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." It's such interesting. Why would it be deceiving ourselves? Because we often think, okay, if I go to church on Sunday and I listen to the pastor, or if I put on a podcast in the car, then that's good. I've shown my love for Jesus. I've grown in Him. I've done what I'm trying to do. And that's not the case. If you're not letting it seep into your heart and bear itself in action, then you're lying to yourself by thinking, if I just listen, that's sufficient. It'll just seep in. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. I cannot read this verse without thinking of the way my mother or others in my family see my eating pattern. Maybe you're like this. You get up, you want a snack, you go to the refrigerator, you open it, you don't see anything you want to eat. You're frustrated, you close the refrigerator door, you go back 30 seconds later, maybe 5-10 minutes later, you go right back to the fridge, open the door, look in it, and you just go back every 10 minutes. Well, maybe there'll be something new inside the fridge this time. Maybe good food I want to eat will just miraculously appear. You constantly forget that you were just there recently and there wasn't anything you want to eat. I'm always at the fridge. Anyway, I say that because it's just one example of how you can be so close to something, it be right in front of your face, and you're not looking for what's there. You're looking for what you want to find there. And when what you want to find there isn't there, you just forget what's really there and leave. Well, that's the way we often treat the law. We look into the law. We see that it doesn't command us or tell us to be as we are. It commands us, tells us to be better than we are. We don't want to live that way. That's not the way we're looking for. So we forget what's there, and we turn away from it. And instead of living as the law tells us to, we turn and we live differently, and we forget what we're supposed to be like. Now, when we talk about the law, there's at least two ways. There's more than two, but there's at least two ways we can think about it. On the one hand, we have what Paul describes the purpose of the law is. In Romans 3:20, he says, through the law comes knowledge of sin. So we have to get, first off, very clear that the law is given so that we can see how far from God we are like, how unlike Jesus we are, just how far we fall when we lie, when we steal, when we set up other idols, when we commit adultery by having lust, when we covet. All of these ways that we're selfish. This law is given so that we have no excuse, and the deception is just seen for what it is, a deception, if we think that we're decent people, basically, on our own, apart from grace. That's the first reason the law is given. And that law condemns us. It's what shows us the wrath of God. And Jesus lived perfectly under the law and took the wrath of God so that we, when we have faith in Jesus Christ, are not condemned by the law. But rather, there's another sense of the law. Because Jesus says in John 14:15, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. It's just the case. And we think freedom is often, I have this ability to do whatever I want. I'm free to follow my own desires. That's not truly freedom. Freedom is actually the ability to do what's right, the ability to do what is good. Because you don't often realize how captive and enslaved to your desires you are. That's not freedom. And that's why James describes the law in verse 25 as the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty. It's still a law. It's still ordering you and revealing what you need to do, but it's not a law of condemnation, because we're not under the condemnation of the law anymore by faith in Jesus Christ. So now, the law is one of liberty, because it's a freedom to do the right thing, something we didn't have before. And so if we persevere in that, it says, then you are being the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. That is the one who will be blessed. It's like Jesus says. Again, so much of James' message is taken from Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount. And he says in chapter 7, verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Who does the will. Which means it's not even just the hearers that aren't doers. Sometimes it's the proclaimers that aren't doers. It's the speakers who aren't actually doers and are hypocrites. And Jesus says, it's the one who does the will of my Father who will enter heaven. James repeats this in chapter 2, verse 12, when he says, so speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty. We will be judged. And while we will not be condemned on that day, because we have the righteousness of Christ as a gift, a righteousness that's not our own, as it says in Philippians 3, but we will also be considered for what we actually have done. And that's an important thing to consider, to be blessed in our doing. And then finally, at the end of chapter 1, we have the summary. If anyone thinks he's religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that's pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And we've talked about this already. The reason James brings up orphans and widows is because these were specific social outcast, oppressed groups. And to truly proclaim that you love like Jesus meant to care for those. And absolutely that's true today as well, but it's more. It's not just orphans and widows. Those are just a paradigm. Those are just a example for the much greater, broader class of all those suffering individuals that are hurting and that we can care for. So, I leave you with that at this time. How can you do that? Again, don't deceive yourself into thinking, I no longer have to follow the law because I'm a Christian. Follow the law of liberty. Persevere and be blessed by being a doer of the word. And what does that look like? It means caring for others. So go out and look for who you can care for today. You're listening to See the Glory, Radio Remnant.